Another example of literary pieces in different genres, literary fiction, The Side of Paradise by F. Scott Fitzgerald. About the author. Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald, September 24, 1896, December 21, 1940, was an American novelist, essayist, screenwriter, and short story writer. He was best known for his novels depicting the flamboyance and excess of the Jazz Age, a term which he popularized. During his lifetime, he published four novels, four collections of short stories, and 164 short stories. Although he temporarily achieved popular success and fortune in the 1920s, Fitzgerald only received wide critical and popular acclaim after his death. He is widely regarded as one of the greatest American writers of the 20th century. Fitzgerald was born into an upper middle class family in St. Paul, Minnesota, but was primarily raised in New York. He attended Princeton University, but due to a failed relationship and a preoccupation with writing, he dropped out in 1917 to join the army. While stationed in Alabama, he fell in love with rich socialite Zelda Sayre. Although she initially rejected him due to his financial situation, Zelda agreed to marry Fitzgerald after he had published the commercially successful This Side of Paradise in 1920. In the 1920s, Fitzgerald frequented Europe, where he was influenced by the modernist writers and artists of the Lost Generation expatriate community, particularly Ernest Hemingway. His second novel, The Beautiful and Damned, 1922, propelled him into the New York City elite. To maintain his lifestyle during this time, he also wrote several stories for magazines. His third novel, The Great Gatsby, in 1925, was inspired by his rise to fame and relationship with Zelda. Although it received mixed reviews, The Great Gatsby is now widely praised, with some even labeling it the greatest American novel. While Zelda was placed at a mental institute for her schizophrenia, Fitzgerald completed his final novel, Tender is the Night, in 1934. Faced with financial difficulties due to the declining popularity of his works, Fitzgerald turned to Hollywood, writing and revising screenplays. After a long struggle with alcoholism, he died in 1940 at the age of 44. A fifth unfinished novel, The Last Tycoon, in 1941, was completed by Edmund Wilson and published after Fitzgerald's death. About the literary piece. The Side of Paradise is the debut novel of F. Scott Fitzgerald, published in 1920. The book examines the lives and morality of American youth in the aftermath of World War I. Its protagonist, Amory Blaine, is an attractive student at Princeton University who dabbles in literature. The novel explores the theme of love warped by greed and status seeking and takes its title from a line of Rupert Brooks' poem Tyre Tahiti. The novel famously helped F. Scott Fitzgerald gain Zelda Sayre's hand in marriage. Its publication was her condition of acceptance. The Side of Paradise chronicles the life of Amory Blaine from his childhood up through his early 20s. Born the son of a wealthy and sophisticated woman, Beatrice Amory travels the country with his mother until he attends the fictitious St. Regis prep school in New England. He is handsome, quiet, intelligent, though lazy in his schoolwork, and he earns admission to Princeton. Though initially concerned with being a success on campus, after failing a class, he gives himself over to idleness. He prefers to learn through reading and discussions with friends than through his classes. Toward the end of his college career, America enters World War I, and Amory dutifully enlists, foregoing his degree during this time overseas. Beatrice passes away. Upon his return to America, Amory meets the young debutante Rosalind Carnage, the sister of his college friend Alec. The two falls deeply in love, but because of his family's poor investments, Amory has little money and Rosalind does not wish to marry into poverty. Despite Amory's best efforts to earn money at an advertising agency, Rosalind breaks off their engagement in order to marry a wealthier man. Devastating Amory, he goes on a 3-week drinking binge which is finally terminated by the advent of the prohibition. Amory's quest for self-knowledge begins to be realized. He has a short summer romance with the wild Eleanor. Soon after, Alec is caught with the girl in his hotel room and Amory takes the blame. Amory then discovers that his last close tie, the dear friend of his mother and his father figure, Monsignor Darcy, has passed away. Further, the family finances have left him almost no money. He decides to walk to Princeton and is picked up along the way by the wealthy father of a friend who died in the war. Amory expounds his new socialist principles and then continues to walk to Princeton. He arrives late at night, um, pining for Rosalind. Amory reaches his hands to the sky and says, "I know myself, but that is all." About the plot. Book 1, The Romantic Egotist. Amory Blaine, a young Midwesterner, is convinced that he has an exceptionally promising future. He attends boarding school and later Princeton University. He leaves behind his eccentric mother, Beatrice, and befriends Monsignor Darcy, a close friend of his mother. While at Princeton, he goes back to Minneapolis, where he encounters Isabel Borge, a young lady whom he had met a little boy and starts a romantic relationship with her. At Princeton, he repeatedly writes ever more flowery poems, but Amory and Isabel become disenchanted with each other after meeting again at his prom. Interlude. Following their breakup, Amory is shipped overseas to serve in the army in World War One. Fitzgerald had been in the army himself, but the war ended while he was stationed on Long Island. Amory's experiences in the war are not described, other than to say later in the book that he was bayonet instruction or bayonet. Book 2, The Education of a Personage. After the war, Amory falls in love with a New Yorker debutante named Rosalind Connage. Amory writes copy for an advertising agency but hates his job because he considers himself as a creative person too good for it. He goes on an alcoholic bender of about 3 weeks, during which he quits his job. Meanwhile, money he money he inherited from his mother is largely lost due to failed investments. Because he is now poor, his relationship with Rosalind collapses as well. She reluctantly informs him that she can no longer see him as she needs to be with a wealthy man. Upon Amory's visit to Maryland, he meets and starts a relationship with an 18-year-old woman named Eleanor. After spending a great deal of the summer talking about their love and the seasons, Eleanor's half-suicide attempt leads their romance to spoil. Amory returns to New York, finding out that Rosalind has officially been engaged to Dawson Ryder, a man of wealth and status. A devastated Amory is further crushed to learn that his mentor Monsignor Darcy has died. Homeless, Amory wanders from New York toward Princeton and, accepting a car ride from a wealthy man, he speaks out in favor of socialism. Though he admits he is formulating his thoughts on it as he is talking. The book ends with Emery's iconic lament, "I know myself, but that is all." That's all, and thank you.